Welcome, everyone, and a very special welcome to you, the listener, joining us for this deep dive. Our mission for this session is pretty singular. We are unpacking one highly illuminating article today titled, Why ADHD Brains Work Better Under Pressure.
Yes.
But before we get into the science or the behavioral strategies or even the brain chemistry, I want to pose a scenario directly to you. Have you ever noticed that you do your absolute best work when a deadline is just hours or maybe even minutes away?
Right.
Like, picture this. While everyone else around you might be panicking at the thought of a looming due date, you feel this sudden, unexpected, almost eerie sense of calm. The mental fog that's been, clouding your thoughts all week suddenly lifts. And out of nowhere, you can finally focus. If you are nodding your head right now, you are in the exact right place.
You absolutely are. And to set the tone for our conversation right at the top, if you experience this reliance on the absolute last minute to get things done, you really need to hear that you are not lazy and you are not broken. What we're exploring today is the biological reality that your brain simply operates on a different chemical timeline.
A different timeline entirely.
Exactly. You aren't failing at a standard timeline. You are succeeding on an alternative one. The pressure of the last minute isn't a sign of poor character. For your unique neural architecture, it is often a biological requirement just to initiate action.
That is so validating to hear right out of the gate. And the source material we're diving into outlines several relatable scenarios that paint just a vivid picture of what this lived experience actually feels like.
It really does.
Listener, consider this first scenario. Staring at a blank screen for days. You know you have a report due. You sit down, you open the laptop, you stare at the blinking cursor, and you cannot write a single word.
You just can't do it.
This goes on for days. It's an agonizing kind of paralysis. And then suddenly, it's 3 hours before the deadline. Something shifts internally. You sit down and crank out a brilliant report, not just passable, but your absolute best work.
What's fascinating here is the word agonizing. That is the crucial operative term. Society often labels this delay as procrastination, which, implies a casual, almost rebellious choice to avoid work.
Like you'd rather be watching TV or something.
Right. But the experience described in the text isn't a relaxing vacation from your responsibilities. It's a period of intense internal friction.
Intense friction?
You desperately want to do the work, but the cognitive mechanism required to start simply refuses to engage. It is a state of executive dysfunction.
Which totally explains why the standard advice of, just buy a planner or break it into smaller steps.
Oh, that advice.
Right. It can feel so unhelpful. A planner doesn't remove that physical friction. The text actually brings up a second scenario that I think perfectly illustrates this misdirected energy.
The chores scenario.
Yes. You look around your house and the chores are piling up. The kitchen is a disaster. The laundry is a mountain. You feel physically unable to start cleaning. It feels like moving through molasses. But then you get a text. A friend is in the neighborhood, and they're going to stop by in exactly 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you become a blur of motion.
You're everywhere at once.
You clean the entire house, do the dishes, organize the living room, all in a frenzied, highly efficient 20-minute window. It's as if you accessed a superpower that was completely locked away 5 minutes prior.
Notice the specific trigger in that scenario. It's the external pressure. The impending arrival of the friend creates an immediate, inescapable boundary.
Because before they texted, you had all day.
Exactly. Without that boundary, the chores could theoretically be done at any time. And to the ADHD brain, any time often translates directly to not right now.
Wow. Not right now.
The brain lacks the internal stimulation to prioritize the task, so it borrows the external stimulation of the friend's arrival to force prioritization.
I remember reading this and thinking about a time I completely reorganized my garage at 11 at night.
Let me guess. You had something else you were supposed to be doing.
I had a massive tax form due the next morning. It's that exact molasses feeling applied to the wrong task. I couldn't do the taxes, so my brain sought out any other form of stimulation, even heavy manual labor, just to feel productive.
That's a perfect real-world example of the brain hunting for engagement. And it leads directly into the third scenario the article highlights, which I actually find the most profound.
The emergency response.
Yes. Experiencing a strange sense of peace and extreme focus during high-stress emergencies. When things go completely wrong, when a crisis hits and the people around you are losing their heads.
You suddenly feel dialed in.
Dialed in. The noise drops away. You are calm, you're clear, and you know exactly what needs to be done.
It's such a fascinating paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Society tells us that early preparation is peaceful and last-minute rushing is inherently stressful.
Right.
But for the ADHD brain, the early preparation phase is fraught with a lack of focus and agonizing friction, while the high-stakes emergency is where clarity finally arrives.
We really need to analyze this cycle because it fundamentally contradicts standard societal expectations.
It turns it completely upside down.
If your brain is wired this way, the quiet Tuesday morning at a desk is your high-stress environment because you are fighting your own neurochemistry just to pay attention.
Wow.
The actual emergency is your comfort zone. The environment is finally providing the exact level of stimulation your brain needs to function optimally.
But even understanding that paradox, the emotional toll of living in it, is heavy. I mean, the article points out this massive contradiction that sits at the heart of the struggle. It's the feeling of immense guilt for procrastinating.
The guilt is huge.
Even though you know deep down you will eventually get the job done. You have a track record of pulling it off at the 11th hour.
You've done it 100 times before.
Right. Yet during those days of staring at the blank screen, you drown in guilt and shame. You call yourself lazy, wondering why you can't just do a little bit of work each day like a quote-unquote normal person.
That guilt is an incredibly heavy burden to carry. You are essentially punishing yourself for a biological process you don't yet understand. You're holding yourself to a neurotypical standard of productivity.
Which just isn't fair.
No, it's not. When your brain requires a different path to reach the same destination, you interpret that difference as a moral failure. Our goal with this deep dive is to replace that moral judgment with scientific understanding.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
If the guilt is just a symptom of us misinterpreting our own behavior, what is actually happening physically? Like, what does the brain scan of someone staring at that blank screen actually look like?
Well, the article states that the brain is working hard to compensate for structural and chemical differences. To truly understand your actions, we have to look at the biology driving them.
Right.
A major piece of this puzzle is what the article calls the dopamine gap.
The dopamine gap.
Yes, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is fundamentally responsible for motivation, reward, and executive function.
It's the reward chemical, right?
It gives you a sense of satisfaction when you complete a task, sure, but more importantly, it's the chemical that motivates you to start the task in the first place.
Ah, okay. So if dopamine is the baseline fuel for motivation and the ADHD brain naturally has less of it, how are we functioning at all on a random Tuesday morning before the panic sets in?
That is precisely where the friction originates. ADHD brains naturally produce less dopamine, and their receptors often process it less efficiently than neurotypical brains.
So they're just running on a deficit.
Their baseline level of this crucial chemical is simply lower, and that creates the dopamine gap. Because of this biological deficit, initiating a task, especially one that is boring, routine, or doesn't offer an immediate, highly stimulating reward, feels nearly impossible.
Because the chemical isn't there to spark it.
There is a profound lack of baseline chemical motivation. When you are staring at that blank screen, your brain is literally starved of the neurotransmitter it needs to initiate the action. You aren't refusing to work. Your engine lacks the spark to turn over.
Which completely changes the math on procrastination. It's not a moral failing. It's a chemical waiting game.
Yes, a waiting game.
But if the brain is operating with a dopamine deficit, how do we explain the brilliant report written in 3 hours? How do we explain the immaculate house cleaned in 20 minutes?
Here is where the biology shifts.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the article introduces a concept here called the adrenaline bridge, which involves a totally different set of chemicals.
This is the turning point in the cycle. Let's say that deadline suddenly appears right in front of you, or your friend is pulling into the driveway.
Panic mode.
Your body suddenly perceives a threat. Social embarrassment, job loss, failure. That perception triggers a state of mild panic, and panic triggers the sympathetic nervous system, resulting in a massive rush of adrenaline and norepinephrine.
But how does that sudden flood of adrenaline create such divergent reactions depending on the type of brain you have? Because, I mean, if you drop a massive deadline on a neurotypical person at the last minute, they usually don't experience an eerie calm.
Not at all.
They experience distress.
Exactly. We have to look at the threshold of stimulation. In a neurotypical brain, one that already possesses a sufficient baseline of dopamine, dumping a huge rush of adrenaline into the system pushes them past their optimal level of arousal.
It's too much fuel.
It's too much stimulation. It leads to overwhelming anxiety, scattered thoughts, and distress. They are over-aroused.
They're the person pacing around the room, pulling their hair out because the deadline was moved up.
Precisely. But for an ADHD brain, the reaction is entirely different. That sudden flood of adrenaline and norepinephrine acts as a bridge.
The adrenaline bridge.
Because the baseline dopamine was missing to begin with, the adrenaline swoops in and temporarily compensates for that missing motivation. It crosses the gap.
Oh, wow.
It elevates the brain from an under-aroused state up into the optimal zone for focus. The panic provides the chemical fuel that the brain was otherwise lacking, and that allows you to finally break the paralysis and take action.
So the adrenaline is essentially acting like jumper cables for a dead battery.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a completely different chemical system, but it provides the necessary voltage to get the engine running. And the text actually takes this a step further by connecting these chemicals to the hardware of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, the prefrontal cortex is the region located right behind your forehead, and it is the seat of your executive functions. Think of it as the brain's CEO.
The CEO.
It handles working memory, planning, organizing, task initiation, and emotional regulation. It's the part of the brain that says, we have a large project. Let's break it down into 3 smaller steps, and let's start step 1 right now.
The exact executive functions that feel completely offline when you're trapped in that blank screen paralysis.
They are offline, and the reason they feel offline is because in individuals with ADHD, this prefrontal cortex region requires a significantly higher level of stimulation to activate fully.
It's a heavy sleeper.
Very much so. A normal, everyday expectation isn't enough to wake it up. The CEO is asleep at the desk. But then, the intense pressure of an impending deadline hits. The adrenaline floods the system like a fire alarm. That provides exactly the massive jolt your prefrontal cortex needs to wake up, take the wheel, and get to work.
And that is why you feel that sudden sense of calm and extreme focus.
Exactly. Your executive center is finally online and regulating your attention entirely thanks to the alarm bells of the deadline.
Knowing that the brain is just waiting for the chemical conditions to be right so the prefrontal cortex can actually clock in. It's a massive relief.
It explains so much.
But as we pivot toward how to actually apply this, the text acknowledges a pretty harsh reality. Living in a constant state of adrenaline-fueled panic is exhausting.
It takes a physical toll on the body.
Yeah. So the article provides strategies for a healthier forward path, emphasizing that the goal is to stop fighting your biology and start working with it. So what does this all mean?
Well, the exhaustion of the cycle cannot be overstated. Relying on your body's fight or flight response just to send an email or clean your kitchen is totally unsustainable over the long term.
Right.
The article highlights that the first and most crucial step on this healthier path has absolutely nothing to do with productivity hacks or time management tools.
It's not the planner.
It is not the planner. The first step is self-compassion. We must address the emotional toll of the guilt we discussed earlier.
Because the text points out that guilt isn't just a bad feeling. It actively drains the exact energy you need to complete the task.
It's an immense energy sink.
Yeah.
Think about the cognitive load it takes to constantly berate yourself.
It's exhausting.
When you understand the science, when you acknowledge that your brain simply needed that adrenaline bridge to function in that moment, you can begin to release the shame. You aren't making excuses. You are recognizing a biological reality.
That makes a lot of sense.
Releasing that shame is a practical energy-saving strategy. It allows you to move forward with a clearer mind, preserving your mental bandwidth for the actual tasks at hand, rather than burning it on self-punishment.
Okay, so moving into actionable behavioral strategies, the text suggests that you don't have to wait for an actual crisis or rely on genuine panic to achieve focus. You can create healthy, simulated urgency.
Yes, simulated urgency.
The article introduces this gentle trick called body doubling. How does borrowing someone else's presence trick the brain into action?
Body doubling leverages our inherently social nature to create necessary stimulation. It essentially involves working alongside another person, whether physically in the same room or virtually over a video call.
Oh, I've done this.
The presence of someone else creates a mild, positive social pressure. You are aware that someone else is there, engaged, and working.
Like going to a busy coffee shop or jumping on a working call with a colleague where you both just sit on mute and do your own separate tasks.
Exactly. This awareness sparks just enough external motivation to stimulate the prefrontal cortex. It simulates a low-stakes adrenaline bridge through social accountability,
Providing the necessary bump in arousal without the intense cortisol-spiking stress of a real looming deadline.
You're essentially externalizing your executive function by leaning on the momentum of the environment around you.
Now, behavioral tricks like body doubling are fantastic, but the text is very transparent about their biological ceiling. Like, these strategies require immense cognitive load to maintain. You are actively manually driving a car that should be an automatic.
That is a vital distinction to make. We must acknowledge the biological limits of behavioral strategies. Tricking your brain with body doubling or setting artificial deadlines takes constant, conscious effort.
You have to keep it up.
You do. It requires energy to maintain the illusion of urgency. The article points out the specific role of medication in this landscape. Behavioral strategies help manage the environment, but appropriate ADHD medication addresses the root neurological deficit.
It addresses the empty fuel tank itself, rather than forcing you to constantly hunt for jumper cables.
Precisely. Stimulant medications, for instance, typically work by increasing the levels of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain synapse. They either stimulate the release of these neurotransmitters or block their reuptake.
Keeping them available in the brain longer.
Yes. By restoring that baseline neurotransmitter level from the start of the day, medication drastically reduces the brain's reliance on stressful adrenaline rushes.
Because the chemical motivation is just there.
It provides the baseline chemical motivation needed to complete routine tasks, meaning you aren't constantly burning mental energy just to simulate urgency. It provides the biological support so that behavioral strategies like planners or body doubling can actually be effective rather than exhausting.
It lowers the activation energy required to just exist and do your work.
It really does.
And we've covered a tremendous amount of ground here. To synthesize what we've unpacked in this article, ADHD truly is a profound paradox. It is a unique operating system that can provide you with unmatched energy and laser-sharp focus when the conditions are highly stimulating. But it simultaneously makes it incredibly difficult to initiate routine behaviors when that stimulation is absent.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the most important takeaway from this deep dive is about your standard of living. You deserve to achieve your goals and realize your potential without constantly riding a stressful, exhausting roller coaster of last-minute panic.
Absolutely.
Understanding your brain's dopamine gap, recognizing how you utilize the adrenaline bridge, and employing tools like self-compassion, body doubling, and potentially medication, these are all concrete ways to step off that roller coaster and find a sustainable path forward.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, listener, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We've established that your brain naturally thrives and ironically finds its deepest sense of calm and clarity during high-stakes situations.
Right.
So what if you stopped trying to force yourself into a quiet, low-stakes routine? How might you intentionally redesign your environment, or perhaps even pivot your entire career path so that this biological need for high-stakes stimulation becomes your greatest daily asset?
That's a great question.
Rather than just a last-minute hurdle to overcome. Imagine a life where your crisis mode superpower is exactly what the job requires every single day.
It changes everything.
It really does. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this brought you some scientific clarity, some relief, and a whole lot of self-compassion. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.